For China's booming film industry, box office revenue rose more than 13% in 2017. The industry generated nearly 56 billion yuan, equivalent to more than 8 billion US dollars. Domestic films contributed more than 50% of the market. Chinese blockbuster Wolf Warriors 2 topped the list and became the country's highest-grossing film ever, raking in around 5.7 billion yuan in ticket sales. 4 other local films made it to the top 10 list, among them Never Say Die, Kung Fu Yoga, Journey to the West, The Demons Strike Back, and Youth.
I'm taking you down, Toretto. Let's play.
The Fate of the Furious was the top-grossing foreign film, ranking second on the top 10 list. 22, featuring the stories of 22 comfort women, became the first Chinese documentary to surpass 100 million yuan at the box office.
I think Chinese movies not only posted quantitative growth, but also opened a whole new dynamic and established a relatively sound mechanism. Both their industrial output and cultural content showed a new look.
9,597 new screens installed in 2017, China's cinema screens now number a record 50,776.
The Chinese movies can grow in strength little by little. Therefore, we should cherish this opportunity and allow different people to make different movies.
China's movie industry has shifted from being profit-driven to pursuing quality. Movies in the past had been produced to earn a quick buck, but became box office flops. This led to a shakedown in the business, which has since improved the domestic movie industry and brought it back to sound and stable development. China's film industry in 2018 will aim to build upon last year's vitality.
For more on China's domestic film industry developments in 2017, we are joining in our Beijing studio Benji, who is a producer and also former executive at Warner Brothers and Disney. Welcome. Long time no see.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy to be back.
Well, great to have you, sir. And also joining us here in Beijing, Teng Jimeng, a freelance movie critic and also cultural commentator. Mr. Teng, welcome as well. This year, the number is gigantic compared to previous times. Chinese moviegoers are just more interested in films, or actually we are having more free time to spend in the theaters? Ben?
Well, the number looks very optimistic. It's a big increase compared to last year.
Yeah.
But actually, I still see this year as a continued slow growth of the market.
Explain.
Because this year is the first year that we start to include the online transaction fee as part of the box office.
I see.
So if we subtract this online transaction fee, which will be like, I think it's 30 million something, right, in the RMB. So if we subtract this number, the growth will not be that kind of ideal. So it's still a very slow growth compared to last year.
I see.
Yeah.
Some say whether this is a fair competition is also a big question mark, because the domestic movies, the international movies, or so-called imported movies, are actually treated very differently when it comes to box office times, all of these possibilities, what theaters, all of these. So, Professor Teng, do you think we are making progress domestic movies?
Well, absolutely. I think the progress is out there is very conspicuous. We are turning out real quality films, right? Both in terms of production values and also storylines, characterization, and also great artists. I mean, if you take, for example, this Wolf Warrior and also Youth, for example, both of these films are actually standing out because of the great storyline, great messages, and also production, professionalism on the part of
For our viewers
producers.
Internationally, maybe they do not know necessarily exactly what these two movies are about. First movie, Wolf Warrior 2. is really leading the box office.
Chinese
here in China.
superheroes.
Superheroes, exactly.
Fighting a foreign enemy, saving Chinese people overseas.
Saving the world, baby.
Even saving the people in Africa.
That's right, that's right.
So that really shows the rise of China power.
Yes.
So I think Chinese audience can relate to this kind of theme. And I think it's part of the reasons why this movie is so successful in China.
A lot of nationalism also involved, some say.
Patriotic kind of
the patriotism, I think.
Patriotism.
Patriotism.
Another movie which is called Youth. I hope we have some clips to play on these movies. It's also about patriotism, but it's in a very different time. And it's more about a reminiscence of the past, the history. Actually involves a story of the Sino-Vietnamese War.
Yes. Well, once again, that's a Feng Xiaogang film, and I would call him the China's Steven Spielberg. I mean, very sentimental, very prolific, and very virtuoso in terms of reflecting upon a particular historical context. And for example, Youth, Fanghua, is a film about the coming age of the generation born in the 1960s, spent their formative years in the 1970s, and also growing up maturely in the 1980s and 1990s. The film actually touches upon the Cultural Revolution, the very tail end perhaps, and also the early years of Chinese reform, and most tragically, the bloody war in between China and Vietnam.
And the disarmament of the PLA, a big chunk of it. In fact, 1 million strong was disarmed. This is part of history that has not been dealt with much, you see, in the past, particularly in Chinese movies, except those that really nationalistic and patriotic movies. So why do these movies is making such a echo among the audience? One is absolutely action movie. Hollywood type, Chinese patriotism. The other also patriotism, but very reminiscent of the history, and sometimes even a little bit critical of the history. Why are they become successful all at the same time?
Well, for me, I think for Wolf Warrior 2, first, I mean the reasons for their success. First, we have mentioned that they have this patriotism, right? People can relate to that China power, rise of China's power. The other thing is, it's a perfect example of what we call the heavy industry movie making, movie production. It show it, there's a great investment in the movie. We can see from the visual effect. And from all this action sequence, the fighting scenes, Chinese superhero, fighting under the water, in the sky, using fighter planes, battleships, even tanks. So people are like, wow, it's like a Chinese audience never saw this kind of, big budget, special effect in Chinese movie. So this is, there's a great production value for Chinese audience.
And for youth, it's a different story.
It's a different one. I think, once again, like Ben said, it's the first film, I think, that tackles so deeply into this rising China as a superpower, perhaps as a just power. I mean, out there saving the Chinese nationals, saving the Africans, and saving the world, perhaps. We are, for the first time, being a force of justice.
Yes.
I mean, back in the past, it's always Hollywood playing that role.
But the movie Youth is a different story, you think?
Youth is very, very different. I think Youth is a very great piece of nostalgia, and Youth is also a piece of looking back into China's tragic history and try to coming to peace with that history. It's about the loss of innocence and also the regaining of useful innocence back in the 1990s after this very tragic thing.
If these two movies are dealing with so-called big topics, as both of you just illustrated, what about the other movies? We see some very interesting phenomenon this year.
That's right.
Small budget art house movies, documentaries like 22, which is about comfort women in China, and also things like 嘉年华, Angels in White.
Angels Wear White.
Yes, that's all small budget art house movie. Nobody expect them to be box office headers in a way, but they did that exactly.
That's why we call this year, 2017, the year of sleepers. A lot of black horse, success of small art house movies. I think it shows a kind of a trend that Chinese audience are starting to see a diversity of movies, not just the big Hollywood special effect action movies. They would like to see something different, and for this, and you mentioned Angels Wear White, Mr. No Problem, the
Yes.
black and white, a period movie, and Path of Soul, Gang Ren Bo Qi, all the three,
By Zhang Yang.
by Zhang Yang, small budget art house movies. They're different. They show a very different level of cinematic arts and skills, and also they have this deep thoughts and audacious reflection of the current social issues, spiritual life of Chinese people.
Many of the words that you just used, Ben, but if you think about that, 1 year ago, we are still talking about blockbuster movies. That's what the Chinese market needs, right? But a year later, it seems that the moviegoers are also really into the stories. They really want to see more than just the blockbusters. Can China just change like that dramatically, even when it comes to what the audience need?
It won't be changed overnight. I mean, what I mean is you cannot say that these high quality art house movies will be the main theme movies in Chinese market. It's not possible. Even in other parts of the world, there's still just for a
Marginal market.
marginal market. But we can see, as I said earlier, the diversity of the audience,
Right.
diversity of Chinese movies. So that's a good trend.
Right. The other thing is, we used to talk about joint production. I mean, you yourself were involved in it, right?
Co-production,
You were
yes,
in
foreign-
many of those
Yeah.
foreign movie companies. But now it seems that trend has gone. Once again, something just happened overnight and then gone. So this is not just about the content of the movies, like we talk about the small budget art house movies. It's also about the way of production.
That's right.
Now China just want to make its own movies. It does not necessarily need to have a joint production with Hollywood, in which Hollywood get the money from China. So it's a very interesting phenomenon too.
Well, co-production used to be seen as a way to learn from Hollywood. It's all about knowledge transfer, right? From Hollywood into China, we borrow, we pay, and then, for example, we learn, we pay by paying, and they earn by teaching.
Right.
And so right now, I think that China
Has that been achieved?
it has been achieved. I mean, look at Wolf Warrior. I mean, this is typical. It's almost like a copycat of
And
the
there's
Hollywood
so
film.
many Hollywood talents are working
That's
in Chinese
right.
productions.
And now we have foreigners. I mean, if you look at, for example, if you look at The Farewell My Concubine back in 1993,
Yeah.
it was basically a co-production film involving Taiwan, Hong Kong, mainland Chinese talents out there, like Leslie Chang out there, right, and Gong Li. I mean, both from Hong Kong and mainlander. Now, I think China is much kind of mature film industry nation at this very point. And so it's not the end, but then our learning curve is still steep.
Right.
But at the same time, I think we are learning the craft, and we are quite trying to tell good stories about China. We have such a huge treasure house of good stories.
Right.
Why can't we tell the stories?
But I was thinking about this before we came into the studio. People have been talking about Chinese contemporary literature. Some readers, particularly ardent readers, complain that most of the literatures today are dealing with the past dynasties. They're not dealing with contemporary life. And many people wonder whether the movies, when they are trying to express certain messages, are also going to fall into the same trap, that it's all about the past, it's not about today. And will the audience be happy about that? Ben, I'm sure you're thinking about it because you're producing a movie right now.
Yeah. Well, there's one theory, one saying by the business insiders and also audience that the moviegoers want to escape from the reality.
Really?
Film
Do
scene
we?
is something
Because
to
reality
escape,
is
right?
so stark, so heavy.
Right.
Well, especially in China right now, even though it's it's booming economy, everybody's making money, it's getting rich, getting better life, but still life is hard,
Yeah,
right?
lots of anxieties out there in the
Exactly.
city, right?
Yeah, anxiety, pressure from life. So there's a trend. People want to get away from it, want to have a daydream when they go to see the movies. So that's part of
But
the
it
reasons.
doesn't mean that they want to go back into the dynasties.
No, I mean, no, and
Movie is an
absolutely.
escape for everybody at any time, right?
I mean, if you look at, we talk about this during our break, and for example, back in 2015, and I mean, it was a big drop back, right? And it's kind of major setback in box office revenue, and it's because of too many fantasy films out there. And
poor
epic,
quality
poor
fantasy
quality,
films.
right? Trying to drag us back to this great dynasty like Teng and stuff like that. And so I think indie filmmakers are actually making a new trend. I mean, like the director you interviewed, Geng Jun, for example, who made Free and Easy. That's a great film about China's reality. I mean, I'm all for these social reality films. I mean, even Feng Xiaogang's Youth is all about this reality. I mean, the changes that actually transformed China, and China eventually being changed by this very social realism thought.
Right.
Literature used to be doing that.
Yeah,
but now film is taking over.
You know, we talk about this at the very beginning. The number is gigantic, even though you could argue, you could analyze in different ways, but the number is gigantic. But the question really is fundamentally, does a good number when it comes to box office really equals to better quality movies these days? Of course, up to interpretation, what better quality we're talking about, but to you, does it mean that?
I don't think so, because even though we see this growing box office every year, but still we have a growing number of movie production every year. Last year there are about 700 movies produced in China, and there are only like 200 released in Chinese market. So 500 movies are gone. They're nowhere.
Where are they?
I don't know. They're like
TV
shelved.
channels,
Yeah,
TV
TV
channels,
channels, online maybe,
Online,
but
maybe.
not in theaters.
Right,
We can be
right,
sure of that. So there's a big waste of money spent on movies. You know, I mean, these numbers cannot be translated into box office. So if we see this 500 disappearing movies can have good quality, or at least average quality, we can see a bigger box office. So
there we go. The number does tell the story, right?
Exactly.
In a way. And Professor Teng, what do you think? Gigantic box office translate into qualities?
I tend to think yes. I think on the one hand is the great improvement of China's cinematic infrastructure. We are now actually #1 in terms of numbers of film screens, right? Movie theaters
50,000.
environment has been greatly changed. Steering, sound, and all that kind of great equipment out there. 3D, 4D films.
That's right.
Now being in China in first-tier, second-tier cities. And so I see a great potential in terms of numbers reflecting this very change, this improvement. Also, thematically speaking, I think Chinese filmmakers are thinking. They're thinking, real thinking people, trying to reflect upon this reality of China, this changing China about, for example, individual lives. Right, individual lives, the fate of the nation, and as well as China's international relationship with the rest of the nation. And I see this film being used as a soft power, trying to attract and trying to appeal and trying to persuade.
Well, I'm not sure whether every film director is thinking about soft power when they are trying to put their movies together. But for now, we want to thank the both of you for being with us and helping us understand the real essence behind the box office. Teng Jimeng, Ben Ji, really appreciate it. Happy New Year to both of you once again. Thank you.